I think for Brooklyn, it's interesting. You forget you got Simmons sitting there, making 38, 48,
Yeah.
$40 million.
Woof.
Um, Supposedly, I guess he could be back on maybe Monday here. You guys saw the inability to close games. I
Yeah.
mean, that wasn't new. I mean, that's been a trend,
Mm,
and it's for Brooklyn, it's hard when you're not making shots. There's no interior presence,
mm.
right? There's no interior presence there. Maybe if you throw maybe Claxton, everything is perimeter oriented
Yeah.
here. You saw it in the Minnesota game last night where it was hard for them to get a shot off at the end of the game. Um, are you snake bitten from what you went through with Harden, Durant, and Irving already? As far as trading out draft picks, are you holding on to those picks for that next superstar to become available? There'll be somebody this summer, always is. All right, maybe it's
Yeah.
Trey Young, for example. I'm just throwing that name out there. Um, so for Brooklyn, but the one thing you don't want to do, and you guys know, you see this, like the Mikal Bridges press conference the other night was like disheartening, right? Like,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I've listened, I've lived through it, and being in the Nets for 20 years, and I get it. Like, Continental Airlines Arena when the Knicks were good, Knicks fans would come over, and that's just the reality of it. That's the reality of being in New Jersey and stuff
Mm.
like that. But when we moved to Brooklyn in 2012, it shifted. I don't want to say like all of a sudden Knicks fans became Nets fans, but
Mm.
it was more balanced.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say like it was more like and when you have a good team,
Good team.
yeah, you have to have a good team. Like when Durant was there and Irving was there, like listen, they had a good team.
Yeah.
But I had never seen anything like what I saw the other night, as far as what 90% Knicks fans maybe there.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be careful with if you're with the Nets with Mikal Bridges here, because who's on a really good contract, but eventually that contract will run out, and you need to win. You need to put players around him that
Yeah.
can win here, because the likelihood for him is that these new extension rules, do not help Mikal Bridges or the Nets. It
Mm.
just doesn't help because of where his contract could go to here.
Mm.
So if you're the Nets, like, you know, who can help you at the deadline? Is it Murray? Is it Brogdon? You've got no point guard next year. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the reality of it. You've got Spencer Dinwiddie and Dennis Smith Jr., who are both going to be free agents, and you cannot rely on Ben Simmons.
Mm-mm.
So and you're not going to have cap space here. So who can you go out and get as far as from a guard standpoint? Is it, and I've thrown out Murray before and I've thrown out Brogdon before, but I think it's a matter of like, are you willing to give up one of those Suns picks? Because you don't
Yeah.
control your own first for the next over the next 4 years. That's the hard part. Is that when you don't have your own first this year, there's no incentive for you to like say, all right, you know what, we're gonna get the number 2 pick in the draft, to kind of really go bottom out, and that's a
Yeah.
hard spot to be in. I mean, they're in a from a draft equity standpoint from other teams, they're in a good spot here. But Brooklyn is going to be interesting as far as because they've got a lot of players that teams like, right? Royce O'Neal, Dorian Finney-Smith,
Yeah.
Dinwiddie. Yeah, I mean, but teams because he's got an expiring contract here. Claxton's on an expiring contract here. But the reality of it is that even if they get into the top 10, they're going to be in the 9-10 game, right? Like
Mm.
that's you just look at the standings right now. You're not catching where there's a big separation from the top 8 to 9 and 10. Like Atlanta, Brooklyn, Chicago. Those are the three teams. I'm not putting Toronto in the mix. Those are the three teams competing for those two spots here. And even if you do win, then you got to win again, right? And then
Yeah.
you're going to get Boston.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an interesting spot. Listen, they're in a better. I know we're on doing Nick stuff, but I'm rambling about net
Yeah. That's
stuff.
right.
But listen, they're in a better spot than they were in 2015, 16 when Sean came in, because there weren't the draft picks there. But I said it when I did their video. It is an interesting spot because what you want to do is build up more, get more draft picks, maybe, because you're not going to make, your pick isn't, it's not a great draft either. So if you, the fifth pick in a draft or the sixth pick in a draft, it's not like you're getting, losing Victor to Houston here. But I would be aggressive if I were them, looking at, Murray, Brogdon, guys like that. Levine
Mm.
doesn't do anything for me. It really doesn't. But yeah, I mean, or they could say, you know what, we're going to roll with this current group and we're going to kind of reset in the off season.
It's just interesting because I feel like, and I know you mentioned where Brooklyn doesn't have any of their draft capital where they can go tank and go get a high lottery pick. But I just feel like they should move Bridges and go get as much draft capital as possible because I just don't see how you can continue in this type of scenario with even with the draft picks that you have and the players that you have. Sure, you can trade them to get like second rounders or maybe
Yeah.
highly protected first round picks, but it just doesn't seem like it's viable to continue to build around Mikal Bridges. So it doesn't just make sense to trade him and get as much draft capital as possible and just hit a hard reset.
It's a good point. Listen, when I was in Brooklyn, we were like hanging on for dear life towards the end, right? Like 14, 15 season after Pierce went to the Clippers and we traded Garnett to the Timberwolves for Thaddeus Young. We kind of knew the end was coming, right? Like you're just hanging on and you didn't have draft picks. And when Sean came in, Marks, like he had no ties to the Boston trade.
Mm.
Like that was the reality. Like he could do it his own way. Like he didn't care if, the number one pick went to Boston and it turned into Jason Tatum, or the number three pick went there and it turned to Jaylen Brown. And he could build it his own way, like how he saw fit. And they did a really good job as far as getting Russell and D'Angelo Russell and Joe Harris and that group of guys, and then turns into Durant and Irving because the culture had been reset. I always find it fascinating though, because now he's almost in that same spot, but because all these deals were his, then you can't move off these players here because wait a minute, the picks I traded to Houston are going to turn into something here. It's kind of like a little bit of a role reversal here.
Mm.
So I'm gonna ask you this question here. If you were the Knicks, all right, I'm just, hypothetical
Yeah.
here, hypothetical, and Mikal Bridges all of a sudden became available, what would you offer the Nets? Besides the contract, it'd have to be four.
Yeah.
What would you got 8 first? And you're not going to lose any core players. Maybe Grimes,
Grimes.
but maybe let's just say no core players. What would you
Yeah.
offer them? Would you offer 4 first?
I think I would. Yeah.
I do. Yeah,
I do
could
4.
see that. Yeah.
Because it's different. And we're hypothetical here. I don't want Knicks fans running around. We're getting Mikal Bridges.
Clip this up.
Because
We're getting Mikal Bridges.
Because guys like that are different than when you went through the Mitchell stuff, right? The Mitchell stuff a year and a half ago was going to be like what Barrett and Quickly or Grant, like the 2 or 3 guys, and then you would have cost you draft picks, and you would have been like left with Brunson and Randall and Mitchell, and you'd be like, oh wait a minute, we don't have anything else, right? Like what else do we have here to go out and get another guy here? But like so that's where teams, and I think we heard it last year when after Brooklyn did the Durant trade, there were teams willing to offer 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. Like that's the reality of it here. So I think if you're Brooklyn, yes, he's got after this year 2 years left on his contract, and it's a great contract here. But I do think you do have to be careful, right? Because losing takes a toll on you. Losing in the fourth quarter takes a toll on you, and it's been, the Knicks game last night against Minnesota, the Clipper game, which was a total disaster in the fourth quarter, 43-18, I think, or something like that. The Portland game before that at Portland here. It's been a tough sled for them. So as I said, like yeah, I would love to build around him here, but at the end of the day, you have to look out for kind of what's the best interest of the team.